The accumulated pheromone levels have decreased, the physician said, direct and precise. Data projected clearly in front of them. Lower threshold than before, and notably more stable. He tapped once on the screen. Prolonged proximity is the primary factor. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The implication was obvious. Valen didn't respond, his gaze steady, unreadable. However, the physician continued, tone tightening slightly. Your rut cycle remains unchanged every 3 months. And it's approaching. A brief pause, deliberate. In previous cycles, you required full physical restraint, maximum suppressants, and endured significant pain to maintain control. No softening, only fact. This time may differ. His eyes shifted subtly toward the door where Aaron waited. If proximity is maintained, full suppression may not be necessary. Silence settled. Heavier than before, Valen finally spoke. Voice low, controlled. He will not be involved unless absolutely necessary. The physician held his gaze for a moment, then nodded, neither of them fully convinced. Outside, Selim stood just beyond the line of sight, hearing enough, not everything, but enough to understand the shift. Valen no longer stood alone against it, and the one filling that space was not him. The realization didn't come like a shock. It settled, cold and sharp, and this time, he chose not to ignore it. The meeting was arranged quickly, discreetly. The royal envoy wasted no time. We need them. Separated, his voice calm, but absolute. We cannot evaluate the Omega under constant influence. Selim didn't react immediately, his expression neutral, and in return, he asked, measured. The envoy placed something small and clear on the table. You will have unrestricted access during the cycle. A pause, intentional, and assistance, if necessary. Their eyes met. Understanding passed without words. Timing, Selim asked. Before the cycle peaks. The answer came instantly, preferably before onset. The envoy slid the vial slightly forward. No color, no scent, no taste, he said. It will only trigger, not destabilize immediately. Then added, almost casually, most of the accumulated pheromone has already been released. The risk is significantly lower. His gaze lingered. An Omega of your caliber should have no difficulty completing the bond. Selim's fingers hovered near the vial, just for a second, then closed around it. He didn't answer, but he didn't refuse, because the alternative was already clear in his mind. Losing meant stepping aside, and he had never done that. The timing unfolded with precision. The meeting ended. The corridor remained temporarily quiet. People dispersing in controlled patterns. Aaron stood outside as he always did, waiting without question. Inside, Valen remained alone, reviewing final reports. The door opened without resistance. Selim stepped in, composed, steady. I won't take long, he said, tone even. Valen didn't turn. Then don't, he replied, eyes still on the screen. Selim stepped closer, not enough to alarm, just enough to matter. I crossed a line earlier, he said. In the corridor, a beat. It was unnecessary. Valen glanced at him briefly, sharp, assessing, then returned his attention forward. Understood, he said, dismissing it. And in that small opening, Selim moved, precise, controlled, a motion so subtle it barely existed. The liquid disappeared without trace, without sound, without resistance, and it was done. Outside, the shift was more abrupt. You'll come with us, the royal officer said, polite, but immovable. Aaron frowned, confusion immediate. Why? Evaluation. The answer was clean, final. Aaron turned instinctively toward the door, something in him tightening. I should stay, he said quietly. He might need. That is not your decision. The officer cut in, not raising his voice, not needing to. Aaron hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. They stepped in closer, closing the space, guiding him away, not forceful, but absolute, inside. Valen felt it before he understood it. A shift too fast, too sharp, his breathing altered. Rhythm breaking, pressure rising under his skin like something building without release. His hand tightened slightly against the table. Too early, he said under his breath. The timing was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. The onset shouldn't be this fast, shouldn't be this intense. He straightened slowly, creating distance, instinctive, controlled. Leave, he said, voice lower now, edged with something harder. Selim didn't move, didn't step back, didn't break eye contact. It hasn't fully begun, He replied calmly, as if stating a fact. Valen's gaze shifted toward him again, sharper this time, something clicking into place, the timing, the presence, the proximity. Wrong. But the realization came with a delay. His body no longer allowed. The pressure surged again, stronger, heavier, pheromones rising fast, saturating the air, thick, suffocating. Valen inhaled sharply, control slipping at the edges, not gone, but destabilizing. Leave. He repeated, clearer, firmer, but the command lacked its usual finality. Selim stepped closer instead, slow, deliberate, closing the distance by a fraction, then another. Not enough to provoke immediate reaction, just enough to shift the balance. You're stabilizing faster than expected, he said quietly, watching him, every reaction, every shift. Maybe you don't need suppression this time. The words sounded reasonable, almost clinical, but they landed differently in the space between them. Valen's jaw tightened, something in him resisting, but his body betrayed him. The absence hit next, sudden and sharp, like something missing where it should have been. His focus shifted, instinct searching for an anchor that wasn't there. Aaron, the realization came too late. He wasn't there. There was nothing to steady the surge, nothing to counterbalance it. The pressure spiked, harder, faster. Valen exhaled slowly, forcing control that was already slipping. You shouldn't be here, he said, voice lower, rougher now. But it wasn't a command anymore. It was a warning. Selim didn't retreat, didn't even hesitate. He stepped closer again, entering the space no one else would have dared to occupy in that moment. Pheromones thickened around them, heavy, charged, dangerous, and, for the first time, Selim didn't avoid it, didn't shield himself from it. He accepted it, stood in it, because this was the moment he had chosen. Outside, Aaron stopped abruptly, his breath catching without reason, something twisting sharply in his chest. Wrong. Everything felt wrong. Wait, he said, trying to pull back. Something's not right. But the grip on him tightened, not violent, just unyielding. Keep moving. The officer said, steady. Aaron turned his head, trying to look back, trying to hold on to something he couldn't see anymore. He needs me. The words came out before he could stop them, instinct overriding everything else. But it didn't matter. They kept walking, the distance, stretched, step by step. Inside, the air broke completely. Valen's control fractured at the edges, the pressure peaking too fast, too soon, too wrong. His breathing unsteady now, control slipping further with each second, and Selim was still there, still close, still not leaving, watching, waiting, ready, one losing control with nothing left to hold on to, one stepping closer instead of backing away, and one being pulled further and further from the only place he should have been. The distance between them no longer just physical, but something sharper, something breaking in real time, something that would not return unchanged. Selim moved first, closing the remaining distance as if nothing had changed, as if the air hadn't already turned suffocating, his voice low, almost gentle. You're already in it, he said, watching every unstable breath, every fracture in control. Let me help you through it. He stepped closer, unafraid of the pressure pressing against his lungs. We had an engagement once, a faint smile, controlled, calculated. And I'm still one of the highest-ranked Omegas in the Empire. His gaze locked onto Valen, steady, persuasive. I can handle this. But Valen didn't move toward him, didn't waver, even as the ruts surged harder through his body. Even as the instinct screamed for relief, his voice cut through, rough, strained, but absolute. Leave. Selim stilled for a fraction of a second, then tried again, softer, closer. You don't need to fight it this time. Valen's head snapped up, eyes no longer calm. Something darker, sharper breaking through. Leave. The word came out lower, edged with something lethal, but Selim didn't step back. Instead, he reached out, grabbing onto Valen, pulling him into an embrace meant to ground, meant to claim. But the moment he touched him, everything shifted. Valen's control snapped violently back into place for a single, terrifying second. His hand shot up, locking around Selim's throat with crushing force. Don't. His voice dropped into something unrecognizable, cold, final. Touch me. The pressure tightened instantly, cutting off air. Selim's breath hitched, panic flashing across his face for the first time. Valen leaned closer, the pheromone pressure exploding outward, overwhelming, suffocating. Either you leave now, his grip tightened further, or you die here. There was no hesitation in his tone, no uncertainty. Only truth. Selim's body reacted before his mind could catch up, the instinct to survive overpowering everything else, the pheromone pressure crushing him from all sides, lungs burning, vision blurring, pain sharp and immediate, real, terrifyingly real. This wasn't something he could endure. Not like this. Not against Valen. Not when he meant it, truly meant it. His hands trembled as they gripped Valen's wrist. Wait. His voice broke, barely sound. Stop. The pressure didn't ease until the exact second Selim's resistance collapsed, until fear replaced calculation completely. Valen released him abruptly, shoving him back without another word. Selim staggered, gasping for air, chest heaving, his entire body shaking uncontrollably. The realization hit. All at once, he had almost died, not metaphorically, not as a threat, but truly, completely, and Valen would not have stopped. Selim didn't look back again. He turned and ran, stumbling out of the room, his composure shattered, his breathing uneven, his body still reacting to the lingering pressure. Outside, he collapsed against the wall before being rushed away by medical staff, still shaking, still trying to pull himself back together from something that had nearly broken him. Inside, Valen didn't move for a second. The control he had forced was already slipping again, the rut surging back stronger, harsher. He staggered back, hitting the emergency panel with his hand, activating the lockdown without hesitation. Alarms erupted instantly, sharp and loud, red lights flooding the space as heavy security doors slammed shut one after another, sealing the room behind layers of reinforced barriers, trapping him inside. Alone, he forced himself further back, breathing uneven, blood already staining his hands where his control had turned inward. Outside, the signal spread through the base immediately. Emergency protocols activated within seconds. He's entered rut, the physician said sharply. Already moving. Where is Aaron? No answer came, and that alone was enough to shift the urgency higher. At the same time, far from the sealed chamber, Aaron froze as the alarm echoed through the corridor, the sound cutting straight through him, instinct reacting before thought. What is that? He asked, already trying to turn back. The royal official beside him smiled faintly, almost amused. Your alpha has entered his rut, he said casually. But don't worry. His tone remained smooth, detached. His fiancée is already there to help him through it. The words hit wrong, sharp and immediate. Aaron's chest tightened. That's not. Stay here. The man interrupted, stepping closer. You'll be returned once it's over. Before Aaron could react further, a cold touch pressed briefly against his arm. Precise, clinical, a needle sliding into a point just below his collarbone, a place not commonly used, but chosen with intent, a location tied to deeper genetic mapping, something beyond standard tests. Aaron flinched, confusion and unease rising instantly. What are you? But the man was already withdrawing, sealing the sample, his interest gone as quickly as it had appeared. That will be all, he said, turning away without explanation, leaving Aaron standing there, heart racing, the alarm still echoing. Moments later, footsteps approached fast, urgent, military. We found him, one of them said, grabbing Aaron's attention immediately. You need to come with us, now. What happened? Aaron asked, already moving. He needs you, was the only answer, and that was enough. As they rushed through the corridors, Aaron caught a glimpse of Selim being treated, pale, shaken, barely responsive, something clearly wrong, but there was no time to process it. Not now. Not when everything in him was pulling him forward, toward Valen, toward the sealed chamber, toward the place he should have been from the beginning. They stopped in front of the final barrier, the pressure already leaking through even the reinforced doors, heavy, suffocating. The soldiers exchanged a brief look, tension clear. Once this opens, we close it immediately, one of them said, voice tight. The locks disengaged in sequence, each layer sliding open just enough, the pressure hitting harder with every second. Then Aaron was pushed inside, and the door sealed behind him instantly, cutting him off from everything else. The air inside was thick, overwhelming, charged with something raw and dangerous. It took him a second to adjust. Then he saw him. Valen was across the room, barely steady, blood staining his hands, his breathing uneven, control hanging by a thread. Valen. Aaron's voice broke, slightly as he rushed forward, but the reaction was immediate, instinctive. Valen moved faster than expected, his hand closing around Aaron's throat before he could stop himself, the pressure sharp, enough to hurt, enough to frighten. Aaron froze, fear hitting instantly, his hands trembling as they reached up, not to fight, but to hold on to him. Valen. His voice shook, barely steady. It's me. His eyes blurred slightly, panic mixing with something softer, something more desperate. It's Aaron. Please, calm down. For a second, nothing changed. Then something shifted, small, fragile. The sound of his voice, the presence, the scent, cutting through the chaos just enough. Valen's grip loosened slightly, his breathing uneven, his control flickering back in fragments. Aaron didn't pull away, even though he could, even though he should. He stepped closer instead, closing the distance completely, and that broke something else entirely. Valen pulled him in, instinct taking over, arms wrapping tightly around him, burying his face against Aaron's neck, drawn to the point where everything felt sharper, stronger, overwhelming. The urge to mark, to claim, surged violently, but he stopped. Himself, biting down hard enough to draw blood instead, his body trembling under the strain. Leave, he forced out, voice breaking. It's not safe. His hand clenched against the wall behind him, striking hard enough to echo, I won't hurt you. But even as he said it, he wasn't sure. Aaron shook his head, his arms tightening around him instead of letting go. I'm not leaving. His voice was soft, but steady. I chose this. He pulled back just enough to look at him, eyes clear despite the fear still lingering. This isn't duty. It's not sacrifice, he said quietly. I want this. I want you. The words settled between them. Real, undeniable. Aaron leaned closer, pressing his forehead briefly against Valen's, grounding him in something more than instinct, more than control slipping away. You won't hurt me, he whispered. I trust you. And in that moment, Valen's restraint shifted, not gone, but redirected, anchored by something stronger than the chaos consuming him. The space between them closed completely, not rushed, not forced, but chosen, and the bond that formed. In that moment wasn't born from loss of control, but from the decision to hold on, even at the edge of it. Levels stabilizing. The technician began, relief already slipping into his voice as the data streamed across the screen. Valen's pheromone concentration is dropping rapidly, approaching safe threshold. A collective exhale moved through the room, shoulders easing after days of relentless tension. He's out of critical range. Another added, quieter now, almost disbelieving, but before the relief could settle, the monitor spiked again, sharp, sudden, violent. Wait. No, that's not right. Fingers moved quickly across the controls, isolating signals, recalibrating. There's another source. The room stilled instantly, every eye snapping back. That's not his pheromone. The technician's voice dropped, confusion threading into it. It's increasing. Numbers climbed, matching, then surpassing the previous peak. It's exceeding his levels. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. The physician stepped forward, gaze narrowing. Origin? He asked, already knowing the answer before it came. Inside the chamber, the reply came tight, controlled, Omega's signature. The word lingered, unsettling, unfamiliar in this context. The physician didn't speak for a moment, then said quietly, continue observation, because intervention was no longer an option, only watching, recording, waiting. 5 days passed under constant surveillance, data flowing without pause, patterns forming where none had existed before, fluctuations that didn't align with any known cycle. The two signatures, one dominant, one rising, intertwining, stabilizing, reinforcing each other in ways that defied standard models. Supply logs showed minimal consumption, food untouched, water barely used, as if whatever sustained them now wasn't physical, as if something else had taken precedence entirely. And through it all, the Omega's signature remained, not fading, not weakening, but evolving. 5 days later, the shift came. Abrupt and undeniable, cycle complete. The technician confirmed, voice steady this time. The room didn't celebrate, not yet. Prepare entry. The physician ordered. The locks disengaged one by one, each layer opening with a heavy mechanical release, and with every barrier that fell, the pressure increased. Thick, saturated air pushing outward, even through reinforced systems. The pheromone density was overwhelming. When the final door opened, it hit fully, Valen's presence still there, heavy, commanding, but no longer unstable, controlled, contained, and woven through it. Something else, softer, warmer, but not weaker, never weaker. The omega pheromone filled the space differently, not oppressive, but enveloping. It settled into the air like something alive, smoothing the edges of Valen's intensity, not suppressing it, but balancing it, stabilizing it. Even the team felt it, breathing easier despite the density. Tension easing in ways they couldn't explain. They stepped in carefully, measured, and then they saw them. Valen was seated against the far wall, completely still, but not relaxed, one arm wrapped tightly around Eren, who was curled into him, fully enclosed within a blanket, hidden, shielded, protected. Valen's posture wasn't passive, it was defensive, coiled. Ready. The moment they entered, his gaze snapped up, sharp, aware, territorial in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. No one moved closer than necessary. Instinct alone was enough to hold them back. The physician raised his hand slightly, voice calm, controlled. Valen, he said carefully. We need to take Eren for medical evaluation. A pause, deliberate, for his safety. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, nothing happened. Valen didn't respond, his hold tightening. Almost imperceptibly, his attention shifting downward, eyes tracing over Eren as if confirming every breath, every sign of life. As if letting go meant losing something he had only just secured. Then slowly, very slowly, something changed. The tension in his shoulders eased. Just enough, awareness settling fully back into place. His arm loosened, carefully, like even that small movement could cause damage. Take him. His voice was rough, worn, but steady, controlled again. The team moved in. Immediately, efficient but cautious, lifting Eren from his hold, and only then did the full extent become visible. Bruises along his arms, his shoulders, faint but undeniable, marks at his throat, and at the back of his neck. Bite marks, unmistakable, raw. Valen's gaze followed every detail, and for the first time since they had entered, something in his expression broke. His jaw tightened, his hand curling slightly as if resisting the urge to reach back out. I did this. The thought wasn't spoken, but it was written clearly across him, sharp, immediate. The physician conducted a quick scan, movements precise, practiced, no internal damage, he reported, surface trauma only. But his tone shifted, curiosity threading into it. There's an anomaly, he added, eyes flicking to the readings again. His pheromones, they're not just different. A pause. They're active. He looked back toward the team. Regenerative properties are likely. The implication hung heavy, unconfirmed, but undeniable. Eren was moved out immediately for full medical care. The door sealed behind them once more, leaving Valen alone, but not in the same way as before. Time passed again, shorter now, more controlled. Until the physician returned, standing across from him, expression composed, but eyes sharper than before. As expected, he began. Your pheromone levels have stabilized within safe limits following the bond, he continued. If maintained, full recovery is probable. Valen didn't respond, his focus fixed. Eren, the physician said next, and this time, there was no attempt to soften it, has changed. A brief pause, deliberate. His pheromone signature no longer matches any prior classification. He turned the screen slightly, data shifting in patterns that didn't align with any known model. What we observed inside the chamber wasn't suppression, he continued. It was synchronization. Another pause, heavier this time. Something was activated during the bond. His gaze lifted, meeting Valen's directly. Something that did not exist before. Silence settled again, deeper now, filled with something unfamiliar, not fear, not relief, but the weight of something unknown. Taking shape. We'll know more when he wakes. The physician finished, but even without answers, one thing was already certain. Whatever had awakened in Eren was no longer something the Empire could define. Eren didn't wake up all at once. Consciousness came back in fragments. First the weight of warmth around him, then the steady rhythm of a heartbeat that wasn't his, and finally the faint, familiar scent that pulled him the rest of the way back. His lashes trembled before lifting, vision still blurred at the edges. Valen. The name left his lips as a whisper. He didn't need to see clearly to know. The hand holding his tightened immediately, careful but firm, grounding. I'm here. Valen's voice was low, controlled, but there was something beneath it, something raw that hadn't fully settled. Eren exhaled softly. Tension he didn't realize he was holding slipping out of him. He shifted slightly, and pain followed, sharp and immediate, forcing a quiet gasp from him. Valen reacted at once, his other arm coming around to support him, slowing every movement. "Don't move yet," he murmured. "You're still injured." Aaron let himself lean into him, just for a moment, just enough to steady himself. When his vision cleared, he looked up and stilled. Valen was closer than he had ever been. Not just physically. There was no distance left in his eyes, no restraint built from duty or control. Only focus. Only him. "You stayed," Aaron said quietly. Valen didn't hesitate. "There was nowhere else I would be." The answer was immediate, certain. It settled something deep in Aaron's chest. The memories came back then, broken pieces stitching themselves together. The confinement, the pressure, the fear, and Valen, on the edge of losing himself. Aaron swallowed. "I thought." His voice faltered, but he didn't look away. "I thought I wouldn't make it." Something in Valen's expression tightened sharply. "You shouldn't have been put in that situation." His voice dropped, darker now. "I should have stopped it sooner." Aaron shook his head gently. "You came back." His fingers curled slightly, brushing against Valen's hand. "That's what matters." Silence fell between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of something fragile, something real, something neither of them could ignore anymore. Aaron moved first. Slowly, carefully, closing the small space between them. Their foreheads touched, breath mingling in quiet synchronization. "I chose to stay," Aaron whispered. "Not because I had to. Not because I was forced." His fingers tightened slightly. "Because I wanted to." Valen's breath hitched. Just once, almost imperceptibly. "You don't understand what that choice means," he said, voice low, like a warning meant more for himself than for Aaron. Aaron smiled faintly, tired but unwavering. "I do." And this time, he didn't hesitate. He leaned in, pressing his lips to Valen's. It started soft, uncertain for only a fraction of a second, before Valen responded. Not with urgency, not with hunger, but with something deeper. Something chosen. His hand moved to support Aaron's back more securely, holding him there as the kiss deepened, slow and steady, as if anchoring both of them to this moment. When they finally parted, neither of them moved far. Their breaths were still close, their foreheads still nearly touching. "I'm sorry," Valen said quietly. Aaron blinked. "For what?" "For everything." Valen's gaze lowered briefly before returning to him. "For not stopping it. For letting you get hurt. For," his jaw tightened slightly, "for losing control." Aaron shook his head again, more firmly this time. "You didn't lose me." His voice softened. "I'm still here." That was enough, for now. Valen didn't argue, but the weight in his eyes didn't fully fade. It probably wouldn't for a long time. After a moment, Aaron spoke again, his expression shifting, becoming more serious. "There's something you need to know." Valen's attention sharpened instantly. "When they took me, the royal inspectors." A pause. They didn't just observe. His hand moved weakly toward his collarbone. "They drew blood." "Here." Valen's expression changed immediately, cold, precise. "That's not a standard extraction point." "I know." Aaron's voice dropped. It felt targeted, like they knew exactly where to take it from. Silence fell again, but this time it was heavier. "We'll run another test," Valen said finally. "Under military supervision. No interference." The tests were conducted within the hour. Same location. Same method. No external personnel allowed. The results came back faster than expected. Too fast. The lead researcher stared at the data longer than necessary before speaking. "This isn't a standard human genome." Valen didn't move. "Explain." A brief hesitation. "Then, there's a secondary sequence. Integrated. Stable. Not artificial." Another pause. "It matches classified records." The room seemed to still. "Non-human origin." Valen's eyes sharpened. "Source." The researcher swallowed. "Merfolk lineage." No one spoke for a second. Aaron frowned slightly, not in shock, but in quiet confusion, as if the word didn't fully belong to him yet. Before Valen could respond, another officer entered abruptly, tablet in hand. "Sir, urgent report from intelligence." Valen took it. His gaze moved quickly across the screen, and then stilled. The air shifted. "They know," he said quietly. Aaron looked at him. "Who?" Valen's jaw tightened. "The royal court." A beat. "They've confirmed your identity." The words landed heavily, but before either of them could react further, the perspective shifted far beyond the Empire's reach. On a distant planet, one long erased from official star maps, deep beneath an ocean that never reflected light, a structure stirred for the first time in years. Ancient systems flickered back to life. Sensors long dormant activated in sequence, scanning, searching, until they found it. A signal, faint at first, then unmistakable. A man stood before the awakening console, unmoving as the data stabilized. His expression, calm for so long, finally cracked. After all this time, he murmured. His hand hovered over the projection, then clenched. "I've found you." His voice lowered, steady but filled with something long buried. "My nephew." Long before Eren learned how to survive on a dead planet, before silence became his only companion and instinct his only guide, there was a story the Empire had tried to erase. It did not begin with him. It began with a cage made of light. She stood at its center, wrists bound, not struggling, not because she had given up, but because she understood something the others did not. Resistance meant nothing in a place where value was already decided. Around her, voices layered over one another, detached, clinical, calculating. Healing output confirmed. Energy retention stable. Bidding starts now. They did not speak to her. They spoke about her, as if she were an object already owned, simply waiting to be transferred. Numbers rose. Interest sharpened. Desire masked itself as curiosity, until the room changed. It wasn't the volume that shifted, but the weight. A single voice cut through the exchange, calm, absolute. "I'll take her." No escalation. No negotiation. The decision landed like fact. Heads turned. Not in anger, but in recognition. The man who stepped forward did not belong in that room. Not in the way the others did. He wasn't there to acquire. He was there because he had chosen to be. The elder brother of the king. A man who had walked away from court long before the throne had solidified its power. A scientist. An explorer. Someone who chased truths others were too afraid, or too comfortable, to question. He stopped in front of her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he reached toward the restraints, but paused. Just enough. Just long enough for her to decide. Leave if you want. Stay if you choose. She did not pull away. That was the first choice. Not forced. Not manipulated. Chosen. He removed the restraints. No one intervened. No one dared. And just like that, she was no longer an item on display. She was something else entirely. Their life together was never safe. It was never meant to be. They existed in the margins of mapped space, in systems without records, in places that did not ask questions because no one important ever passed through them. He taught her the language of human worlds, the structure, the deception, the illusion of control. She taught him how to feel what could not be measured, how to listen to currents beneath reality itself. There were moments, brief, fragile, where they allowed themselves to stop running, to exist, to choose each other again and again, despite knowing how it would end. Eren was born into one of those moments. Not planned, not protected, but real. And from the second he opened his eyes, they both understood the truth. He was not just a child. He was proof of something the Empire would never allow to exist freely. Returning to the Empire had not been ambition. It had been calculation, a mistake disguised as logic. Laws meant safety. Structure meant predictability. But laws only exist for those without power. The king saw her once, and that was enough. What he felt was not love. It never had been. It was recognition. Ownership without permission. Obsession without restraint. And when he learned what she was capable of, what she truly was, he stopped pretending otherwise. The accusation appeared overnight. Perfect. Untouchable. Treason. Unauthorized contact with non-human entities. Threat to imperial stability. No trial. No defense. No delay. Eren's father was taken in front of them. He did not resist. Not because he couldn't, but because he had already seen the outcome. Fighting would change nothing. Not this time. Before he was restrained, he looked at her. Just once. Long enough to say what words could not carry. "Don't come for me." But she did. Because love does not follow logic. And that was exactly what the king had anticipated. A trap, set with precision. One life, for another. A controlled exchange. But the Empire was not as unified as it appeared. Not everyone had forgotten who the king's brother used to be. What he had given. What he had protected. And someone chose to act. A door opened where none should have existed. A path appeared that had not been there seconds before. No alarms. No warning. Just opportunity. They took it. They ran. From that moment on, stopping was no longer an option. The Empire hunted them relentlessly, not as fugitives, but as assets. Something to be retrieved. Something to be contained. Years dissolved into fragments. Different skies. Different gravity. The same pursuit. Eren grew in motion, in silence, in tension that never left. He did not understand the reason. Only the urgency. Until urgency became identity. Until running became the only thing that felt real. And eventually, There was nowhere left to go. K-27 was not chosen. It was what remained. A planet stripped of value. Atmosphere unstable. No recorded life. No strategic importance. No reason for anyone to look. Which made it perfect. The descent nearly killed them. The ship tore through layers of broken atmosphere before crashing into the surface below. Systems failed. Structure collapsed. Silence followed. They should have died there. But they didn't. Not yet. Not before finishing what they started. They built what they could with what was left. A sealed habitat. Minimal life support. A caretaker unit, stripped down and rewritten to serve a single purpose. Keep him alive. Not comfortable. Not safe. Alive. That was enough. Aaron remembered pieces of it now. Not as images, but as weight. The way his mother held him tighter than before. The way his father moved slower, but never stopped. The way the air itself felt like it was closing in, like time had already run out and they were just catching up to it. Listen carefully. His father's voice, steady, grounded, unshaken even now. You must survive. No promise of happiness. No reassurance. Just truth. His mother knelt in front of him, her hands warm against his face, her forehead resting against his. Close. So close he could feel her breath. No matter what happens, you do not go back. Her voice didn't break, but something in her eyes did. That was the last moment that belonged to them. The rest became light. Systems activating. Energy sealing. Something inside him responding, then disappearing. Locked. Hidden. Protected. The world went dark. And when he opened his eyes again, they were gone. Years later, on that same dead world, he learned how to breathe, how to move, how to survive. But he did not remember why. Until now. The past did not return in full. It did not need to. The truth settled into him anyway. Heavy, undeniable, alive. Aaron stood still, breath shallow, fingers tightening as something within him shifted. Not breaking. Awakening. The air around him changed first, subtle, almost imperceptible. Then the moisture in the room responded. A faint tremor. A pull. As if something unseen had answered him. His pulse synced with it. Not fear. Not confusion. Recognition. His gaze lifted slowly, something new settling behind his eyes, something older than memory, deeper than instinct. Understanding. They didn't just want me, he said quietly, voice steadier than it had any right to be. A pause. They were waiting. The realization did not shake him. It anchored him. Because this time, he remembered what mattered. Not their faces. Not their names. But their choice. Their warning. Their last command. Survive. And never go back. But somewhere deep beneath that command, something else stirred. Not a memory. Not a voice. A pull. Distant. Vast. Calling. And for the first time, Aaron was no longer sure that staying away was still an option. The order came down in silence. Fast, cold, absolute. Detain Aaron. Identity, descendant of a traitor. Classification, high-level threat to imperial stability. Directive, immediate capture. The words burned across Valen's screen, and this time there was no ambiguity left. No more testing. No more shadows. Just the Crown's final move. Down the corridor, Aaron didn't need to see the order. He felt it. The shift in the air. The pressure closing in, like the world itself had narrowed its focus onto him. What stirred inside him wasn't faint anymore. It was awake. Valen stepped in, stopping just within reach. They issued the order, he said. To take you. Aaron held his gaze. If I fall into their hands, his voice was quiet, steady. I won't be me anymore. Right. Valen didn't answer. He didn't need to. A secure signal cut through the room. Encrypted. High command level. Source, Selim. Valen accepted. The older man appeared again, more strained this time, as if even speaking now carried risk. General, he said, you need to hear this before they arrive. His eyes flicked once, like he was checking something beyond the frame. The Crown isn't acting blindly. The room stilled. They have a countermeasure. A beat. A weapon designed specifically for him. Valen's expression didn't change, but something behind it hardened. It was developed years ago, during the first attempts to capture Aaron's mother. The air seemed to drop in temperature. They couldn't control her pheromones. Not at first. The man's voice lowered. So they built something that could. A flicker crossed the screen, data, partially corrupted, but enough. A suppression field, tuned to override resonance patterns like his. A pause. It doesn't just block the effect. His eyes darkened. It forces it inward. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. They used it on her. No one spoke. She survived. A beat. But not whole. The words landed like impact. Her ability was destabilized. Her body couldn't regulate it anymore. Another pause. They broke her without killing her. Aaron didn't move, but something in his eyes shifted, sharp, cold, unmistakably awake. And now, the man finished quietly. They're bringing it for him. The signal flickered harder now. Time was running out. If they activate it, he won't just lose control. A final beat. He'll be forced to submit. The transmission cut. No trace. No recovery. Just the truth. For a second, no one moved. Then Aaron exhaled slowly. So that's their confidence. His voice was no longer uncertain. It was clear. Grounded. Not just to capture me. A beat. But to break me. He lifted his head. His gaze didn't waver anymore. I won't become their weapon. A pause. I won't become their chain. The air around him tightened. Subtle. But enough that every alpha in the room felt it. Not pain. Not yet. But pressure. Real. Rising. Valen stepped forward. He didn't reach for him. But he didn't step away either. Call all senior command. Within minutes, the room filled. Faces that had followed him through war. Through fire. Through impossible odds. Valen stood before them. No strategy. No projection. Just truth. The Crown has ordered Aaron's capture. A beat. I will not comply. The words settled heavily. You have a choice. His voice was steady. Unyielding. Stay, and follow the order. A pause. Or stand with me. No promises. No protection. Just a line. The first officer stepped forward. Then another. Then another. One by one, they chose him. Until a small group remained still. Selim. Silent. Watching. And this time, Valen didn't ignore it. Their eyes met for just a fraction longer than necessary. Long enough to see it. Not hesitation. Not conflict. Calculation. Somewhere, already, a decision had been made. Initiate separation protocol, Valen ordered. All systems under my command. Independent control. A beat. Now. The system fractured instantly. Access lines severed. Commands collided. Data rerouted, locked, stripped. A silent war ignited across every channel. Then, another signal. External. Royal forces had entered range. ETA, 12 minutes. Faster than expected. Too fast. Which meant one thing. They were already deploying. A second alert followed. Unknown energy signature detected. Expanding field pattern. Approaching fast. The room went still. Valen didn't need confirmation. He already knew. They're activating it. The words came out low. Controlled. But heavy. Across the room, several alphas shifted instinctively, as if bracing for something they couldn't yet feel. Aaron closed his eyes for a brief second, then opened them again. Calm. Focused. No fear left. Then we don't let them get close. The pressure around him surged. Just slightly, but enough to ripple through the room again. Stronger this time. More defined. Not wild. Controlled. Learning. Adapting. Not a weapon. Not yet. But no longer something that could be easily contained. Valen stepped in front of him fully now. No distance. No hesitation. Listen to me. His voice dropped. No matter what happens, a beat. I won't let them turn you into that. Not a promise. A decision. A line drawn against the entire empire. And beyond the walls, the royal fleet closed in, carrying a weapon once used to break his mother, now aimed at him. Inside, systems split. Loyalty shattered. Power rising. And somewhere in the shadows of it all, Selim moved first. Quietly. Decisively. The war had already begun. They just hadn't fired the first shot yet. The first alarm didn't sound like a siren. It sounded like silence breaking. One by one, the lights across the command room shifted, green to amber, amber to red. External breach confirmed. No more countdown. They were here. Positions, Valen ordered, already moving. His voice stayed low, but it cut through everything. Commands snapped into motion. Defensive grids activated. Internal routes sealed. And then, before the first physical impact, something else hit first. A pulse. Invisible, but suffocating. It rolled through the station like a pressure wave, low and crushing. Every alpha in the room stiffened at once. Not pain. Not yet. But wrong. Deeply wrong. Aaron felt it before anyone else. His breath caught, just for a fraction of a second. Then everything inside him twisted. The energy that had been flowing outward, controlled, steady, was suddenly forced inward. Compressed. Reversed. Like something had reached inside him and closed a fist around his core. Valen, he didn't finish. His body folded slightly, one hand gripping his chest as the pressure spiked. It's active, Valen said immediately. No hesitation. Fall back. Shield him. The second pulse hit harder. Sharper. This time, it locked onto him. tuned, precise, designed. Aaron gasped, his control slipping for the first time. The air around him distorted violently, not expanding, but collapsing inward, folding space tight around him like an invisible cage. A thin line of blood slipped from the corner of his mouth. And then, someone dropped. A senior Alpha officer hit one knee, breath knocked out of him by instinct alone. Another staggered back, hand bracing against a console. The room shifted instantly. This wasn't theory anymore. It's forcing his output back into his system, a tech officer shouted. If it keeps building, he'll collapse, Valen cut in. Across the walls, impact warnings flared. The first breach tore through the outer hull, controlled, surgical. They weren't here to destroy. They were here to take. And they were already inside. Defense squads, intercept. Valen commanded. Doors slammed shut across corridors. Magnetic locks engaged. But then, internal access override. For half a second, everything froze. Then Valen turned. Slowly, toward the back of the room. Seal 'em. One of them lowered his hand from a restricted console. The override hadn't come from outside. It came from within. Silence dropped, sharp, lethal. You already chose, Valen said quietly. The man met his gaze without flinching. The Empire doesn't bend for a single anomaly. His tone was calm, detached, almost bored. His eyes flicked briefly toward Aaron. And it certainly doesn't fall for one. No hesitation, no remorse, just execution. He moved. Fast. A concealed weapon snapped into place, aimed directly at Aaron. Valen moved first. The shot never landed. The impact cracked through the air as Valen deflected it, closing distance instantly. And that was enough. The room detonated into motion. Close-range combat erupted, violent, precise, unforgiving. Valen struck hard, efficient, disabling his opponent in seconds. Around him, loyal officers engaged Sealam's faction, forcing them back, but they weren't trying to win. They were buying time. For the weapon, the field intensified. Aaron's knees buckled this time. He barely caught himself. The pressure inside him surged, spiraling out of control. Not outward, inward, crushing. His heartbeat spiked, then stuttered violently. His vision fractured. Sound warped. For a split second, everything dropped into silence. Then came roaring back. Too loud, too fast. Aaron, stay with me. Valen's voice cut through the distortion. He was there, one hand gripping his shoulder, firm, grounding. But Aaron barely processed it. It's crushing it back, he forced out, voice. Breaking. I can't. Another pulse hit. Stronger. Brutal. It tore through him completely. Aaron choked, his entire body locking as the energy inside him surged beyond control. This time, 3 alphas dropped at once. One hit the ground hard. Another gasped for air. The third didn't move at all for a second too long. Alarm screamed. Bioenergetic instability. Critical. Microfractures splintered across a nearby console, glass cracking under invisible pressure. The air itself seemed to ripple, like it couldn't hold. We're losing him, someone shouted. Outside, the royal unit advanced without resistance, carrying the weapon that had once broken his mother, now fully deployed. Inside, Valen's grip tightened. His voice dropped, sharp, cutting through everything. Look at me. Aaron's vision flickered, barely focusing. You are not their weapon. A beat. You are not their chain. The next pulse built, larger than all the others combined. The breaking point. Aaron's fingers clenched weakly into Valen's sleeve, just for a second. A tether. A choice. Somewhere beneath the pressure, beneath the collapse, something held. And then he pushed back. Not outward. Not wild. But precise. Focused. Against the force trying to crush him. For one fraction of a second, everything froze. Then the collision happened. The field met resistance. Real resistance. The air snapped. A shockwave detonated outward, violent, concussive. Several soldiers were thrown off their feet. Consoles shattered. Lights flickered wildly as the system glitched under the surge. Even the incoming signal distorted, fracturing for a split second. Not broken, but shaken. Aaron gasped, barely holding himself together. Blood traced down from his lip, but his eyes were clear. Awake. Unbroken. I'm not. His voice shook, but didn't break. Yours. The system faltered. Just for a second. And that second was enough. Valen moved instantly. All units, advance. Because this wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was a crack. In their control. In their certainty. In their system. And outside, the royal fleet continued its approach. Unstoppable. Carrying a weapon that had once shattered a life. Now facing something that refused to break. Inside, Loyalties had split. Systems had fractured. Power had awakened. And in the shadows of it all, Selim moved again. Quietly, already setting the next move in motion. The war hadn't just begun. It had already drawn blood. The first crack in the defensive line came without sound. One moment the inner seals were holding, red barriers locked tight across the corridor network, and the next a section of reinforced plating simply folded inward, not blown apart, not burned through, but peeled back with surgical force as if the station itself had been persuaded to open. Royal breach units moved through the gap in perfect formation, black armor stripped of insignia, faces hidden, weapons low and ready, not advancing like soldiers entering battle, but like specialists arriving for retrieval. They did not fire at random. They did not hesitate. They already knew exactly where they were going. "Contact in Sector 3, one of Valen's officers shouted, but the warning came too late to change anything. The battle had already begun the moment the outer systems failed. Valen moved before the second report finished, one hand still braced at Aaron's shoulder, the other lifting toward the tactical display as he rerouted internal squads with brutal efficiency. Cut them off at the lower spine corridor. Lock blast doors behind them. No one reaches this room. Commands flew outward. Systems responded, then stuttered. Another override hit the network hard enough to shake the display. Unauthorized access. Route control denied. Seal failure. They're inside the internal grid, a tech officer said, voice tightening. Someone is feeding them our lock sequence. No one had to say the name. Valen's gaze cut across the room, finding the place where Selim had been moments earlier. Empty, of course. Around them, the fight inside the command room had already broken into smaller, vicious collisions of force and strategy, loyal officers driving Selim's people back from the core consoles while trying not to lose sight of the real threat, because none of that mattered if the weapon reached Aaron. And it was already close. Aaron felt it before the sensors did. The pressure that had been forcing inward, grinding against his nerves and breath and heartbeat, changed shape. It became narrower, sharper, deliberate. Not a field spread across the station anymore, but a lock seeking the shape of him specifically. His knees weakened all at once. The hand at his chest tightened. The air around him seemed to pull taut, as if invisible wires had lashed onto his bones and were drawing everything inward by force. A strangled sound escaped him before he could stop it. Valen turned instantly. Aaron. The single word came low, cutting, focused. Aaron tried to answer, but the second wave hit before sound could form. This time there was no gradual build. It struck with horrifying precision, sinking through skin and muscle and straight into whatever lived beneath, into the thing inside him that had only just begun to wake. The force did not suppress it. It seized it, twisted it, compressed it until pain no longer felt like the right word for what it was doing. Aaron folded forward hard enough that Valen had to catch him fully this time, one arm locking around his waist before he could hit the floor. Blood touched his lip again, brighter now, spilling down in a thin line that looked far too vivid against his skin. 3 consoles around them blew out in a shower of sparks. Not from impact, from resonance backlash. One of the senior Alpha commanders dropped to both knees, breath torn from him by instinctive recoil alone. Another stumbled backward into a bulkhead, one hand at his throat, disoriented by the invisible pressure scraping across the room. "It's increasing," the tech officer shouted, almost unable to hear himself over the alarms. "The output is doubling every cycle. If they lock him completely, he won't survive it." The physician finished, pale now, eyes fixed on the rising data. That was when the inner door split open. Not the outer breach corridor. Not another distant seal. The command room itself. Royal strike units came through the opening at last, compact and silent, flanking a low rolling device built like a coffin laid on its side, metallic, sealed, ribbed with blue-white emitters that pulsed in rhythm with the pain tearing through Aaron's body. He saw it and understood at once, not how it worked, but that this was the thing. This was what they had used on his mother. Something old, refined, cruelly patient. A weapon built not to kill, but to teach the body that resistance only made the pain worse. "Secure the subject," one of the royal operatives said through a filtered mask. No urgency, no strain, as if the outcome was already decided. Valen handed Aaron off for half a second to one of his most trusted officers only because he had to move, and when he moved, the entire room changed. He crossed the distance like impact made flesh, striking the lead operative before the man finished raising his weapon. Bone cracked. The operative hit the wall and went down. Valen pivoted immediately, took the second at the throat, drove him across the rolling platform itself, and smashed him into the emitter frame hard enough to dent the metal. Behind him, his officers engaged without needing commands now, the room erupting into close-range combat, so tight and violent that every shot risked hitting the weapon or Eren or their own side. Selim appeared only when the worst possible moment arrived. He stepped through the smoke and failing light at the rear access point with 2 members of his family guard still at his side, expression composed in a way that made him look almost detached from the chaos he had engineered. "You should stop," he said, not loudly, not to the room, but directly to Valen. "This ends one way." Valen did not answer. He disarmed another royal operative with a brutal twist and drove an elbow into the man's chest hard enough to stop him cold. But Selim kept coming, voice calm, eyes on Eren. "You know what he is now. You know what they'll turn him into if he lives outside control." This was inevitable. One of Valen's officers lunged at him. Selim's guard intercepted instantly. Steel met steel, close and ugly. Sparks spat across the floor. "You drugged me," Valen said at last, and it was almost worse that he said it so quietly. No rage in it. No loss of control. Just a fact that had already passed judgment. Selim's expression shifted for the first time, something tightening beneath the surface. "I gave you a chance," he said. "You chose him over everything else." "Yes," Valen answered, and that single word landed harder than a scream. Selim stilled, only for a second, but that second was enough to reveal the wound beneath everything else. Then the weapon surged again. Eren cried out this time, unable to stop it. The sound tore across the room. Every head turned. His back arched violently, hands clenching around nothing as the suppression field drove deeper, forcing his awakened power back into him with nowhere to go. It was like watching someone drown on dry ground. Blood ran warmer from his mouth now. A vein of pale blue light flickered under the skin at his throat, then vanished, then appeared again stronger, as if something beneath his human form was trying desperately to surface and being beaten back each time it rose. The emitters on the device flared brighter. The room pressure spiked. Glass along the upper tactical wall burst outward in a spray. "His system is collapsing," the physician shouted. "We have to shut it down." "Then shut it down," Valen snapped. But the answer came immediately and uselessly. "We can't. It's keyed externally." Of course it was. Somewhere beyond the station, the royal fleet was feeding the pattern, holding the weapon steady from a distance where none of Valen's people could touch it. Selim saw the realization land and seized it. "You can't stop this here," he said, stepping closer, almost through the battle now. "Stand down. Hand him over. This ends with him alive." Alive? Valen turned then, fully, and for the first time something lethal showed plainly in his eyes. Like his mother? Selim did not answer. He did not need to. That silence damned him more thoroughly than words ever could. Eren could barely see them anymore. The room had become flashes, shapes, pain and pressure, and the terrible grinding sensation of something inside him being forced to turn against itself. He heard Valen's voice sometimes, but as if from underwater. He heard alarms. Metal. Shouting. None of it mattered compared to the crushing inward spiral. The pull that had once felt like distant water, like a tide calling from somewhere beyond. Memory was gone now. Or no, not gone. Buried. Held under by force. And beneath even that, somewhere so deep he almost missed it, another thing remained. A thread. Thin. Constant. Calling him not outward, but through. His vision flickered and landed on Valen just as another operative broke past the fighting line and reached for him. Valen intercepted on instinct, taking a blade across his side to stop the man from closing the last step. Blood hit the floor. Eren saw it, and something in him snapped. Not outward in violence. In refusal. The next pulse hit him full force, and instead of collapsing with it, he felt the exact place where the weapon wanted him to yield, where it expected the pain to turn him obedient. Submit here. Break here. Become smaller. Go still. His mother had endured this. Not whole. Not broken enough for them. That truth blazed through him like a second heartbeat. No. The word did not leave his mouth. It formed lower than speech, deeper than thought. Somewhere in the buried core the weapon was crushing. No. The emitters around the platform screamed. Not metaphorically. The sound that came from them was high and mechanical and suddenly unstable. Every screen in the room glitched white. Eren's eyes opened fully, clear despite the tears burning there, and for one impossible instant the pressure stopped feeling like a cage and started feeling like resistance. Something to push against. Something that could be answered. The blue light beneath his skin returned, stronger now, threading under his jaw, his throat, the edges of his collarbone like submerged lightning. The nearest Alpha operative froze mid-step, knees buckling without understanding why. Another dropped his weapon entirely, fingers gone numb from the resonance washing through him. Impossible. One of the royal techs breathed through comms, the word leaking into the room from an open channel. Valen heard it. More importantly, so did Aaron. Good. Let them be afraid. The next thing that happened was not controlled. It was not elegant. It was survival. Aaron shoved back with everything he had left. The field met him head-on. For a fraction of a second, the two forces locked so perfectly against each other that the whole room seemed to hold its breath. Then the collision broke. A shock wave tore outward, slamming bodies into walls, ripping weapons from hands, cracking the suppression platform straight down its center. One emitter blew apart. Then another. The polished floor beneath Aaron fractured in a spiderweb burst. Valen turned into the force instead of away from it, covering Aaron with his own body as debris and broken light cascaded around them. Selim was thrown backward hard enough to lose footing for the first time, his shoulder striking the frame of the ruined door. The field did not collapse completely, but it stuttered, faltered, weakened. Enough. Just enough. Aaron sagged forward, body trembling so hard it looked painful to remain upright. Blood marked his mouth, his chin, the front of his collar. But his eyes were still open, still aware, still his. He looked past the wreckage, past the choking smoke and sparking systems, and found the royal operatives staring back at him with something they had not carried into this room. Fear. I'm not yours, he said, and his voice shook, but the words did not. Beyond the shattered bulkhead, new alarms erupted across the station. Not from the royal fleet, not from Valen's systems. Something else had entered the perimeter. Something fast, something unknown. Every screen that still functioned flashed with the same impossible reading, foreign signal. Deep ocean spectrum. Unidentified vessel approaching. The room did not understand it yet, but Aaron felt it. Through the ruin, through the pain, through the fading suppression field, and the blood in his mouth and Valen's arms still braced hard around him. The call. Closer now. Answering. And in the stunned half-second before anyone could react, everyone in that room understood the same thing at once. They were no longer fighting a war with two sides. The sound came first, low, vast, and impossibly deep, threading beneath the fractured alarms like a second heartbeat the station had never been designed to carry. It did not rise. It settled, and everything else bent around it. Aaron felt it before the sensors tried and failed to name it, the thin call inside. Him pulling tight, no longer distant but answered, present, undeniable. His breath hitched, pain still burning through his body from the broken weapon, but something steadier now anchoring him from beneath it all. Not strength. Not yet. But something older. Something that knew him. Across the command room, the royal operatives faltered for the first time, their formation fracturing at the edges as instinct fought against training. Unknown entity inside inner perimeter, a systems officer stammered. No propulsion, no entry vector. The displays flickered violently before stabilizing long enough to show it. A shape that refused to resolve, elongated, fluid, bending light like something moving through water instead of vacuum. It did not approach the station. It arrived. Hold formation, the lead operative snapped. Objective unchanged. Secure the subject. They moved fast, faster than before, because now, for the first time, they understood they were no longer the only hunters in the room. Valen stepped forward immediately, placing himself between them and Aaron, blood still dark against his side, but his stance unbroken. You don't get another step. They split, clean, precise, forcing him to choose. One blade flashed. One pulse shot cut across the air. Valen intercepted both, but the opening was enough. One operative slipped through, closed in. A hand locked around Aaron's arm. Aaron staggered, his body still unstable, the aftershocks of the suppression tearing through him. He tried to pull free, but his strength failed him at the worst moment. Valen, the name broke from him, raw. Valen turned. Too far, too late, and for a fraction of a second, the distance between them became absolute. And then the world stopped agreeing with itself. The operative froze mid-motion, not restrained, halted, as if movement itself had been denied. The air thickened, not pressure, not gravity, authority. The grip on Aaron's arm loosened. He stumbled free and did not fall. Something caught him, not hands at first. Something like water that held shape, cool and unyielding. Then it resolved. A figure stood where there had been nothing. Tall, still, cloaked in something that shifted like liquid shadow. His presence did not push outward. It settled, and everything else moved around it. The royal operative tried to raise his weapon. His hand trembled, stopped, refused. The newcomer did not look at him. He looked at Aaron, and recognition struck, not memory, not fully, but something deeper. Blood, origin, home. Found you, the man said quietly. Took you long enough. Aaron's breath caught. You, he didn't know the word. The man stepped closer, and then he stopped. His gaze shifted, not to Aaron's face, lower, to the center of his body. The air changed, subtly, but unmistakably. Silence settled, not forced, but chosen. The man's expression stilled in a way that erased everything else. Combat, enemies, even Valen standing just behind Aaron. He looked again, more carefully this time, as if confirming something that could not be mistaken. And then, very quietly, "You're carrying." The words didn't echo. They sank. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Aaron froze. His mind blanked. What? The man's gaze lifted slowly back to his face. And for the first time since his arrival, something unguarded surfaced. Shock, sharp and raw, followed almost immediately by something else. Relief. Fierce. Protective. "You're carrying a child," he said, more clearly now. The certainty in his voice left no space for doubt. Behind them, Valen went still. Not controlled. Not calculated. Everything inside him locked at once. Aaron. The name came quieter than it ever had. Aaron turned slightly, looking at him, searching, confused, overwhelmed, still trying to catch up to something his body had known before his mind. I didn't know." The man exhaled slowly. "Of course you didn't. It's early." His eyes flicked briefly toward Valen. Assessed. Then back to Aaron. "But it's there." The silence that followed was heavy. Alive. For one fleeting second, something like warmth passed between them. Family, found too late, but not too late for this. The man's hand lifted slightly, hovering near Aaron without touching, instinctively protective. Then it hardened. Decision overtook everything else. "We're leaving," he said. "Now." Valen stepped forward immediately. "He's not going anywhere until he is." The man cut in, not raising his voice, but ending the argument before it formed. "And you will not follow." The air tightened again. Absolute. Valen didn't back down. "That's not your decision." The man looked at him fully. "You let them touch him," he said evenly. "You don't get a second failure." The words landed hard. This time, Valen did react, something deeper shifting, but he didn't deny it. Instead, "If he goes with you, he lives," Valen said. No hesitation. "If he stays here, he becomes their target again." His gaze flicked to Aaron, softer for a fraction of a second. "You should go." The words cost him. Aaron felt it, in the tension of his grip, in the way he didn't look away. Aaron's breath trembled once, then steadied. He looked between them, between safety and everything else, between leaving and choosing to stay. His hand tightened in Valen's uniform. No, the word came soft, but it did not waver. Valen's gaze snapped back. "Aaron, if I leave," Aaron said, voice still unsteady but anchored by something deeper now, "they won't stop." His eyes flicked briefly toward the royal forces struggling to recover. "They'll follow. They'll hunt. And next time," his hand moved unconsciously to his body. Subtle, but enough. "Next time, it won't just be me." Silence fell again. He lifted his gaze back to the man. "I know why you came. To protect me. A beat. But I can't run." The man's expression hardened. "You're not running. You're surviving. So did my mother." The words landed like a fracture. Something in the man's gaze cracked. Just slightly. Enough. And look how that ended. Silence. Sharp. Real. Aaron didn't look away. "I won't let it end the same way." His voice did not rise. "I stay." The man stared at him, long enough that the room seemed to hold its breath. He looked at Aaron, then at Valen, then back again, weighing the past, the future, the child. "You would choose this," he said slowly, not questioning, recognizing. Aaron didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answer was already made. The man closed his eyes for the briefest second. When he opened them again, something had changed. "I won't watch history repeat," he said quietly. Then, final, "So we change it." His head turned slightly. Beyond the shattered bulkhead, the fluid silhouettes tightened instantly, aligning, choosing. "We don't take you away," he said. "We stand with you." The tide shifted. Not rescue, not escape. War. Valen didn't speak, but something in him steadied. He adjusted his hold on Aaron instead. Stayed. The man's gaze flicked to him one last time. Measuring. You keep him alive, he said flatly, or I take him from you myself. Then he turned, and Aaron's voice came, softer now, steadier. Thaler. The name felt unfamiliar on his tongue, and yet, not. The man paused, just for a fraction of a second. Then, took you long enough, Thaler Ver said quietly. And the station, steel, systems, structure, gave way around him like water, making room for something that had always belonged to deeper currents. And this time, when the tide turned, it did not turn back. The war did not end. It recalibrated. What had been chaos only moments ago now held itself in a fragile, unnatural balance, like a blade suspended mid-fall, waiting for the slightest shift to decide where it would land. The royal forces had not retreated. Valen's command had not advanced. And between them, something older than both had drawn a line that neither side dared to cross. The Seaborn did not form ranks. They did not posture. They simply existed, fluid silhouettes bending light and presence, as though the station itself had become too rigid to contain them properly. Even the air felt altered, heavier, quieter, as if sound itself had learned restraint. Cease engagement. The royal command finally ordered, tension threaded tightly beneath control. Maintain perimeter. No one argued. No one rushed. Because for the first time, neither side held dominance. Not here. Not now. At the center of it all, Aaron stood, barely held upright by the steady presence of Valen at his side. And watching them, unwavering, unreadable, was Thaler Ver. The shift came without announcement. One of the Seaborn moved, gliding across fractured flooring toward a fallen soldier whose breath had already begun to fail. It knelt, not quite touching, not quite separate, and something like a current passed through its form into the wound. The bleeding stopped, not slowed, not managed, stilled, as if the body itself had been reminded how to hold together. Around the chamber, more followed. Royal. Valens. It made no difference. They did not ask allegiance before they chose to preserve life. They simply did. They're stabilizing both sides, one of Valen's officers whispered, unable to hide the disbelief. Valen didn't look away from Thaler. For now, he said, because this was not mercy. It was control. Thaler stepped forward into what remained of the command space, the broken architecture reshaping itself into something that felt less like a battlefield and more like a place where decisions were made and consequences accepted. This pause will not last, he said, his voice low but absolute, carrying farther than raised commands ever could. They will adapt. The Empire always did. Valen shifted, adjusting his hold on Aaron just enough to ensure he remained steady before stepping forward beside him. Not shielding, not yielding, standing. Then we move before they do, Valen replied. Thaler's gaze turned to him fully, and for a moment, the space around Valen tightened, not physically, but in something deeper, something that reached beyond sight and into instinct itself. A pressure, subtle but immense, brushed against him, probing, measuring, seeking fracture points. Valen did not react. He did not resist. He simply held his ground, controlled, anchored, unshaken. The pressure lingered, then withdrew. Thaler tilted his head slightly. Not fragile, he said. A brief pause. Good. It was not approval, but it was acceptance. His attention shifted back to the room. Your empire believes it understands us, Thaler continued. You have studied what you could observe. His gaze flicked briefly toward the shattered remnants of the weapon that had nearly broken Aaron. You identified patterns, built counters, named what you saw. His voice lowered, not softer, but deeper. But what you named was only the surface. Silence tightened around his words. What you call pheromones, Thaler said, is not the source. A beat. It is the language. Valen's gaze sharpened. And the weapon? Thaler did not look away. Interferes with that language, he said. Distorts it. Disrupts its flow. No denial. No deflection. It works, Valen concluded. It interferes, Thaler corrected calmly. We do not oppose it directly. Strategy, not weakness. Valen understood immediately. Then we change the conditions, he said, or we become something it cannot suppress. This time, Thaler's gaze returned, not to Valen, but to Aaron. That, he said quietly, is already beginning. Aaron's breath hitched faintly. On the surface, Thaler continued, his pheromones are stable. His eyes flicked briefly to Valen, contained, then back to Aaron. But beneath that control is something else entirely. The air shifted again, not outward, but inward, as if the space between them had deepened. He cannot reach it, Thaler said, because he was never meant to hold it alone. Aaron stilled. But you, Thaler continued, are not separate from him. His gaze lowered briefly, acknowledging what had already changed between them. You are bonded, and you carry what comes next. The weight of that settled, not as fear, but as inevitability. You can reach it, Thaler said, if you stop trying to control it. There was no ceremony, no ritual, only truth. Close your eyes. Aaron obeyed. Do not reach for power, Thaler instructed. Reach for him. Aaron exhaled slowly, focusing, not on the chaos around them, not on the war pressing at the edges, but on Valen, on the steady presence he had never needed to question, on the connection that had never required force to exist. For a moment, nothing. Then pressure. Distant. Vast. Something buried too deep for instinct alone to access. Aaron tried to grasp it. It slipped. Again, Thaler said. He tried. Failed. Again. Closer, but not enough. Each attempt dissolved the moment he tried to take hold of it. Frustration surfaced, sharp and immediate. Aaron opened his eyes. I can feel it, but I can't reach it. Because you're still trying to claim it, Thaler replied evenly. It is not something you take. A pause. It is something that answers. They tried again, and again, and again. Each time, the distance narrowed, but never closed. Eventually, Thaler stepped back. Enough. Not dismissal. Not disappointment. You are not ready. Aaron's jaw tightened. We don't have time for that. You do, Thaler said. Or you fail. The words were not harsh. They were final. The shift away from strategy came quietly. The war remained, but for the moment, it waited. In a quieter section of the station, where the distant hum of systems replaced the echo of conflict, Aaron sat, tension still coiled tightly beneath his skin. Valen approached without sound, lowering himself beside him. Not crowding, not distant, just present. You're forcing it, Valen said quietly. Aaron didn't look at him. If I don't, you will break it, Valen interrupted. Not sharply, just truthfully. A pause. Then Valen's hand settled over Aaron's, steady, warm, grounding. This isn't something you fight. Aaron's breath faltered slightly. Then what is it? Valen's gaze softened, not weakening, but opening. Us, he said simply. The words settled deeper than anything else had. His hand shifted slightly, anchoring Aaron without holding him in place. And it's not just you anymore, Valen added quietly. Our child is part of this too. The words landed differently now. Not as shock, not as uncertainty, but as something real, something present. Aaron's free hand moved instinctively, resting against himself, not in fear, but in recognition. His breathing slowed. The tension in his shoulders eased, not gone, but no longer suffocating. Don't try to control it, Valen murmured. Just stay with me. Aaron closed his eyes again. This time, he did not reach. He did not search. He stayed. With Valen. With the steady rhythm of his presence. With the quiet, undeniable connection that had always existed without effort. And slowly, something answered. Not violently. Not explosively. A current. Deep. Vast. Alive. It rose. Not because he forced it, but because it recognized him. Aaron's breath softened. His own pheromones shifted, not as a surge, but as an unfolding, expanding gently into something that did not collide, but harmonized. He did not try to contain it. He did not try to shape it. He allowed it to move through him and in. Doing so began to guide it. Valen's breath caught, just slightly, as something beneath his control responded in kind, rising, not in resistance, but in answer. The space around them changed. Subtle, but undeniable, like a tide that did not crash, but rewrote the shore beneath it. And for the first time, Aaron did not lose himself in it. He did not fight it. He did not try to hold it still. He let it flow. And in that surrender, he found control. The war did not wait for them to be ready. It returned, sharper, colder, and far more precise. The Empire had adapted. It always did. The second activation of the weapon did not arrive with sound. It arrived with absence. The moment it came online, something essential vanished. Not air, not light, something deeper. The living current that threaded through every breath, every instinct, every unseen connection, flattened, silenced. The Seaborn recoiled first, not in fear, but in recognition. Their forms destabilized, edges fracturing as though forced through a space too narrow to contain them. Healing ceased. Movement slowed. The fragile balance shattered instantly. They've tuned it deeper. A voice shouted, cut short as the pressure intensified. Aaron felt it hit before the words finished. This time it did not stop at the surface. It reached further, past instinct, past awareness, into the very current he had only just begun to understand. It didn't suppress. It denied. His breath broke. His body locked as the connection vanished mid-motion, severed before it could even rise. Pain followed. Clean. Immediate. Eren, Valen was already moving. There was no hesitation left. No more strategy. Only execution. At the far end of the fractured command deck, the weapon pulsed. No light, no sound. Only pressure, tightening in steady, suffocating cycles. It was no longer a tool. It was control made absolute. You won't reach it, a royal commander called, stepping into their path. Not this time. Valen didn't slow. Then you're already dead. The collision was instant. Blades cut through space. Energy fractured against force. Valen moved with ruthless precision. Every strike stripped to purpose. Every motion aligned toward one outcome. Forward. But they were ready. More of them. Stronger. And the pressure from the weapon grew with every step closer. Eren forced himself to follow, each movement heavier than the last. The connection flickered, unstable, fading, but not gone. Not completely. Not anymore. Stay with me, Valen said. Eren didn't answer. He was already there. They moved together. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but connected. Where Valen broke through, Eren held. Where Eren faltered, Valen anchored. And still, the weapon pressed harder. Closer. Too close. The pressure spiked violently as they crossed into its core range. Eren staggered, breath tearing from him as the suppression slammed down, cutting him off entirely. The current vanished. Silence flooded in its place. Valen, he didn't finish. Because Valen had already acted. His arm came around Eren, pulling him in, not away from the enemy, but into him. And then he let go. Not control. Everything. Valen's pheromones surged outward in a single, overwhelming release. Not as a weapon, but as a shield. Vast. Uncontained. Wrapping around Eren completely, isolating him from the distortion long enough for him to breathe. The cost was immediate. Valen's body seized for a fraction of a second. Just enough. A blade cut across his side. Another struck deep into his shoulder. Blood followed instantly. He did not retreat. Did not break. He held the field. Held Eren. Don't stop, Valen said, his voice lower now, strained, but steady. Finish it. Eren's vision blurred, but the pressure eased just enough. Just enough for something to answer. Not fully, not cleanly, but there. The current stirred again, faint, distant, but alive. Eren reached, not with force, not with desperation, with recognition, with connection, with him. Valen's pheromones surged wildly around them. Vast, overwhelming, unstable. Too much to control. Too much to contain. Eren felt all of it. The scale. The weight. The power Valen had never been able to touch without losing himself. And this time, he didn't try to hold it. He stepped into it. Valen, Eren said, his voice steady now, grounded in something deeper than fear. Let me. No hesitation. No question. Valen released the last restraint he held. The flood broke instantly, and Eren caught it. Not by force. Not by dominance. By guiding it. By becoming part of it. His own pheromones unfolded. Not pushing against Valen's, but weaving through them, aligning, softening, directing. Not control. Integration. The current roared to life, not around them, but through them. Eren breathed in, slow, steady, and lifted his hand, trembling, but precise. Now. And the tide answered. Everything Valen carried, every buried layer, every fragment of power he had never been able to use, rose as one, unified for the first time under Eren's guidance. And Eren directed it. Forward. Into the weapon. The impact made no sound. It did not explode. It collapsed. The field surrounding the weapon fractured instantly, not breaking outward, but folding inward as the current overwhelmed its structure at a level it had never been built to withstand. The pulse stuttered, warped, failed. Then, it disappeared. Not destroyed in pieces. Removed. The pressure vanished completely. For one suspended second, the battlefield forgot how to exist. Then everything returned at once. The Seaborn surged, their forms stabilizing as the distortion lifted. Valen's forces advanced without hesitation. The royal lines broke. Not cleanly, but enough. Enough to end it. Push forward. Valen's voice cut through the chaos, even as blood ran freely down his side. And they did. The final resistance collapsed under the force pressing against it. And then, the king stepped forward. No longer hidden. No longer shielded. His presence settled over the battlefield immediately. Heavy, suffocating, absolute. His pheromones spread outward in precise, crushing waves. Refined control honed over years of rule. Not wild, not unstable. Command. You think this ends here? He said, calm despite the ruins surrounding him. His gaze locked onto Eren. Recognition flickered. Cold. Certain. You think you've surpassed me? A step forward. Pressure surged. You are nothing more than what I allowed to exist. Eren walked toward him. Alone. Valen did not stop him. Because this was no longer his battle. The king's presence pressed down harder, seeking to dominate, to break, to reclaim control. Eren did not resist it. He moved through it. You hurt them, Eren said quietly. Not anger. Not rage. Truth. The current rose. The king's control tightened in response, pressing harder. You broke them. Another step. Closer. The pressure wavered, just slightly. You turned their lives into something you could use. The current shifted, focused, and you called it order. For the first time, the king's expression changed. Subtly. Enough. This ends with me, Eren said. And then, he let the current fall. Not outward. Inward. Around him. The king's pheromones collided with it. Refined control meeting something deeper, older, unbound by hierarchy. For a moment, they held. And then they broke. Not violently. Inevitably. The king's breath faltered as his control fractured, his dominance folding inward under pressure it could not command, could not override, could not survive. No explosion. No spectacle. Only collapse. Quiet. Absolute. When it ended, his power was gone. And the war finally stopped. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then, slowly, something changed. The weight that had pressed over every breath, every instinct, every unspoken hierarchy, lifted. Not replaced. Not transferred. Gone. For the first time, no one in the room could force another to kneel. Behind him, Valen exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Blood still ran down his side. His body still strained under everything he had pushed beyond its limit. But his gaze never left Eren. Not relief. Not disbelief. Something steadier. Something certain. Eren turned slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. And this time, neither of them needed words to understand what had changed. The war did not end with an explosion, but with a silence so deep it felt unfamiliar, as if the Empire itself had forgotten how to exist without pressure crushing down on it. The battlefield lay still beneath a pale sky, the weapon reduced to nothing, the king fallen, and for the first time in decades, the air no longer carried fear, only the fragile weight of something new beginning to take shape. Truth spread not through proclamations, but through fragments that could no longer be hidden. Records of experiments, of unlawful detainments, of a ruler whose obsession with control had slowly turned an empire into a cage. And people did not celebrate. Not yet, because freedom, when it comes after years of control, feels less like victory and more like something you are afraid to trust. Valen woke slowly, as if surfacing from a place where even pain could not reach him anymore. The familiar weight that had lived inside him for years, the relentless pressure, the constant restraint, the silent threat of losing control, was gone, not suppressed, not contained, but truly gone, leaving behind a quiet that no longer felt dangerous but steady, almost foreign in its calm. He turned his head, and Eren was there, sitting close, watching him not with fear or tension, but with something softer, something unwavering. And when Eren spoke, his voice low and certain, "You're back." Valen exhaled a breath that felt like it had been held for years, answering simply, "I think. I finally am." His hand moving instinctively to find Eren's, their fingers intertwining without hesitation, no surge of overwhelming force, no clash of power, only warmth, only connection, only something that no longer needed to be fought or restrained. Recovery came not as fragility, but as a quiet rebuilding. Wounded soldiers treated not only with medicine, but with stability. And the merfolk moved through the aftermath like a calm tide, healing what could be healed without claiming dominance, leaving behind restoration rather than control. And Thaler remained only long enough to see that balance would hold, his gaze sharp as he studied Valen once before giving a short nod. "You've learned," to which Valen replied, steady, "I had to." And when Thaler turned to Eren, his expression softened in a way so slight it could have been missed. "And you have only just begun," he said before later standing with him beneath a quiet sky, speaking of a mother who had not lost but chosen, who had protected what mattered most, his voice carrying not grief but certainty. And then, just once, a warning directed not in anger but in promise, that if Valen ever became the reason Eren broke, he would return. And Eren, calm and unwavering, answered that he would not need to, earning from Thaler a final nod not as a leader, but as family before he disappeared, leaving the Empire to rebuild itself not through force, but through change. Power did not vanish, but it shifted, reshaped under Valen's command into something that no longer relied on absolute control, systems replacing unchecked authority, transparency replacing silence. And though resistance remained, fragments of the old regime, external forces, testing the Empire's stability, they found something different than before, because Valen no longer fought as a weapon barely held together, but as someone in control of himself, precise and unyielding. And when Eren stood beside him, calm and steady, the battlefield often shifted before conflict could even begin, many choosing surrender over destruction. Selim did not stand among them. His fate decided not in spectacle, but in quiet judgment, his betrayal undeniable, yet his past not erased. Years of loyalty weighed against a choice that had aligned him with control instead of protection, and in the end, the verdict came without ceremony, his title stripped, his authority removed, exile given not as mercy nor cruelty, but as consequence. And he did not resist. The last time Valen saw him, there were no chains, no guards forcing him forward, only a man standing at the edge of departure, facing the vast emptiness beyond. And after a long silence, Selim spoke, his voice low, distant. I thought I was protecting something. Turns out I was just afraid of losing control. And Valen did not interrupt, did not argue, because some truths did not need to be challenged. And when Selim added, with a faint, humorless smile, "You didn't hesitate when it mattered," Valen answered honestly. "I did. I just chose anyway." And that was enough. No apology offered, no redemption asked for. Only acknowledgement before Selim turned and walked away without looking back, leaving behind not closure, but something quieter and more real. Time moved forward not in leaps but in subtle shifts, mornings becoming calmer, nights less heavy, and within that stillness, something new began to grow. Eren, standing by the window with one hand resting lightly over his abdomen, aware of the life there, not with fear, but with a quiet certainty, and Valen stepped behind him, his presence familiar, grounding, his hands settling gently over Eren's without pressure, not claiming, only there. And when Eren murmured, "It's strange, everything's finally quiet," Valen replied, his voice low and certain, "It won't stay that way forever." And Eren nodded softly, "I know," before adding, after a brief pause, "But this time, we'll be ready." And Valen's fingers tightened just enough to be felt as he answered, "We already are." And outside, the Empire stretched beneath a new sky, still marked by what had come before, still healing, but no longer ruled by fear. And inside that quiet moment, without needing to say it aloud, they chose each other again, not because they had to, but because they could. The world had grown quieter, not empty, not still, just softer, the kind of quiet that didn't come from silence, but from the absence of pressure. No weight forcing breath shallow, no invisible hand pressing choices into shape, just space, open, unclaimed. Morning light spilled slowly across the room, warm and unhurried, brushing against glass and steel that no longer felt cold. Outside, the horizon stretched endlessly, untouched. Inside, Eren stood by the window, one hand resting gently over himself, not out of instinct this time, but awareness. His breathing was slow, steady, anchored. The current moved with him now, not distant, not overwhelming. Familiar, like something that had always belonged to him, finally recognized. Behind him, footsteps. Quiet, certain. Eren didn't turn. He didn't need to. "You've been up for a while," Valen said, his voice low, softened by sleep, but still carrying that same grounded certainty. Eren let out a small breath, something close to a quiet laugh. "Couldn't sleep." A pause. Then softer, not because of anything bad. Valen stopped just behind him. Not touching, not yet, but close enough that the air between them shifted, familiar, steady, alive. "I know," he said. His gaze didn't go to the horizon. It went to Eren, to the subtle rise and fall of his breathing, to the way his hand rested where it did, not protective, not uncertain, just real. Eren turned slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. Something in his expression had changed, not lighter, not heavier, just settled. "It's different," he said. Valen stepped closer. This time, his hand lifted, slow, deliberate, resting over Aaron's where it lay. Warm, steady, grounding. It's supposed to be, he replied. Aaron's breath softened instantly at the contact. The connection between them responded without effort, without tension. The current shifted, not rising, not surging, but aligning, like something recognizing its place. Valen's thumb moved slightly, brushing once. Barely there, but enough. You don't have to hold everything anymore, he said quietly. Aaron shook his head, just once. A small movement. Certain. I'm not. His fingers curled slightly beneath Valen's hand, not gripping, just answering the touch. I haven't been for a while. Valen didn't respond immediately. Instead, he moved closer, closing the last of the space between them until Aaron could feel the warmth of him at his back, steady and present. His other hand came up, not urgent, not claiming, resting lightly at Aaron's waist, anchoring him there. Not holding him in place. Just there. Aaron exhaled slowly, leaning back just enough for the contact to settle fully. No hesitation. No uncertainty. The kind of closeness that didn't need permission anymore. You're still tense, Valen murmured, close enough now that his voice carried more than sound. Aaron let out a soft breath. A little. Valen's hand shifted slightly, thumb tracing a slow, grounding path along Aaron's side. You don't have to be. Not an order. Not even reassurance. Just truth. Aaron closed his eyes for a moment. Not to escape, but to feel. The warmth. The steadiness. The connection threading through both of them without resistance. His hand moved from where it rested, turning gently beneath Valen's until their fingers laced together, natural, unforced. When he opened his eyes again, the horizon hadn't changed, but something inside him had. He turned more fully this time, facing Valen. Close now. No distance left to measure. For a moment, they just stood there. No urgency. No need to speak. Aaron's hand lifted slightly, brushing against Valen's shoulder, not checking, not questioning, just tracing presence. Real. Solid. Here. Valen didn't move away. His gaze softened, not weakening, but opening. His hand rose to Aaron's jaw, steady, careful, not because Aaron was fragile, but because this mattered. Their foreheads touched lightly. No force. No claim. Just contact. The kind that didn't demand anything, but gave everything. Aaron's breath hitched, just slightly, not from fear, but from the quiet weight of it. We made it, he said softly. Valen's thumb brushed once more along his jaw. We did. A pause. Then, quieter, and we're not losing it. Aaron let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. No, he said. We're not. The connection between them shifted again, not rising, not overwhelming, but deepening. No longer something new. Something known. Valen leaned in just slightly. Not rushed, not claiming. Just enough for their lips to meet, soft and certain. No urgency. No hunger. Just warmth. Familiar. Real. When they parted, nothing broke. Nothing changed. It simply remained. Aaron's hand rested lightly against Valen's chest now, feeling the steady rhythm beneath it. Alive. Unrestricted. Free. We'll figure everything else out, Valen said quietly. Aaron nodded. This time, without hesitation. Without doubt. Together. Outside. The light grew stronger, stretching across the horizon, touching everything it reached without resistance. Inside, nothing needed to be forced. Nothing needed to be proven. They weren't holding on anymore. They weren't surviving anything. They were choosing this. And somewhere beneath everything else, the future was no longer something waiting ahead. It was already here.